Hello everyone, today we are exploring chapter 5 from class 7's English NCERT book, the story called Quality by John Galsworthy. This story gives us a peek into the life of a talented and dedicated shoemaker and teaches us valuable lessons about hard work, craftsmanship and honesty. So let's start. Before you read, ever wonder if a shoemaker can be called an artist? Well, absolutely. When someone has the same pride, skill, and respect for their craft as any artist, they are an artist in their own right. In this story, we meet Mr. Gessler, a shoemaker from Germany who lives in London. He is dedicated to his work, and you will see how he pours his heart into every pair of shoes he makes. The narrator knew Mr. Gessler since he was young because he made his father's boots. He lived with his older brother in a small shop on a quiet street in a fashionable part of London. This shop had its own special charm. There were no big signs or advertisements, just a simple name, Gessler Brothers, and a few boots displayed in the window. Mr. Gessler did not make just any boots. He only made boots that were ordered, and every single pair he made fit perfectly. Making such fine boots always felt like some sort of magic to the narrator. And even now, it feels mysterious and impressive. One day, while narrator was there to get fitted for boots, he silly asked, "Isn't it really hard to do, Mr. Gessler?" He gave a little smile through his red beard and replied, "It is an art." The narrator explains that he did not have to visit Mr. Gessler often because his boots lasted a very long time. His boots were so well made that they felt timeless, almost like he put a part of himself or essence into each pair. Visiting Mr. Gessler's shop felt calm and peace, like entering a church. There was only one wooden chair for customers where people would sit and wait patiently. The narrator describes the sound of Mr. Gessler approaching with a low sound of his voice and tapping of his slippers on the floor. While waiting, the narrator could smell the leather and other materials which he calls incense of the shoemaking trade. Mr. Gessler would return holding a piece of high-quality gold brown leather, which shows his attention to detail and appreciation for the materials. Mr. Gessler would look at the leather with admiration and say, "What a beautiful piece." This line highlights how much he loved his work and valued his materials. After the narrator also admires the leather, Mr. Gessler would ask when he would like the boots to be ready. The narrator would politely respond, saying he would like the boots whenever it was convenient for Mr. Gessler. Mr. Gessler would suggest a time frame, often 2 weeks, which he called fortnight. If it was Mr. Gessler's older brother serving him, he would say, "I will ask my brother," showing that they worked together. After placing his order, the narrator would quietly say, "Thank you." "Good morning, Mr. Gessler," Mr. Gessler would respond, but he would stay focused on the leather, completely absorbed in his work. As the narrator left the shop, he would hear Mr. Gessler's slipper tapping on the stairs as he went back to work, almost as if he was returning to his dream of making boots. This emphasizes Mr. Gessler's passion for his work. The narrator recalls one specific day when he told Mr. Gessler about an issue with his last pair of boots, which made a creaking sound. Mr. Gessler stared at the narrator for a while, as if waiting for him to take back or clarify his complaint. Then he replied, "It shouldn't have creaked." Mr. Gessler is surprised and disappointed as he takes pride in his boots being flawless. The narrator confirms that boots did in fact creak. Mr. Gessler suggests that perhaps the narrator got the boots wet before they had fully settled or found themselves, which might have caused the creaking. The narrator disagrees, saying he does not think that is what happened. Mr. Gessler lowers his eyes almost as if he is trying to remember the exact pair of boots in question. The narrator begins to feel guilty for bringing up this problem, as it is clear Mr. Gessler takes it very seriously. Mr. Gessler tells him to send the boots back so he can inspect them. He goes on to say that some boots are bad from birth, in other words, flawed from the start. He assures the narrator that if he can't fix them, he won't charge him. The narrator recalls one time when he wore a pair of factory-made boots bought in an emergency into Mr. Gessler's shop without realizing. Mr. Gessler took his order without showing any leather options, which was unusual. The narrator could sense Mr. Gessler noticing the poor quality of the factory-made boots he was wearing. Finally, Mr. Gessler commented, "Those are not my boots," showing he recognized immediately that the narrator was wearing shoes not made by him. Mr. Gessler's tone wasn't angry or sad, but it had a quiet intensity that made the narrator feel uncomfortable, almost like his disapproval was deeper than words. Mr. Gessler pointed out a spot on the narrator's boots where it did not fit quite right, showing his expertise in noticing even the smallest details of comfort. Mr. Gessler noted, "It hurts you there?" pointing out the uncomfortable spot. He commented that big factories or firms have no self-respect, meaning they don't care about the quality of their products. It was rare, but Mr. Gessler suddenly opened up and spoke with bitterness about the difficulties and hardships in his trade. This was the only time the narrator ever heard Mr. Gessler talk about the challenges he faced as a shoemaker in a world moving towards mass-produced goods. Mr. Gessler is upset that large companies attract customers with advertisements, not with high-quality craftsmanship. He feels that these companies, which do not care as deeply about the quality of their boots, are taking away customers from people like him, who genuinely love and care about their craft. He explains that over time he has lost more and more customers and work. This decline has continued year after year, and he warns that he may soon have no work left at all. The narrator observes Mr. Gessler closely and notices for the first time how much he has aged. His face shows signs of deep struggle and bitterness, and his once red beard now has many grey hairs. This shows the toll that his declining business and competition have taken on him. The narrator tries to explain to Mr. Gessler why the last pair of boots he bought creaked, trying to soften the impact of his complaint. Mr. Gessler's sadness and dedication to his work deeply affect the narrator. Out of respect and sympathy, he orders several pairs of boots. These boots were of such high quality that they lasted for years, so the narrator did not need to visit Mr. Gessler's shop for a long time. After a long time, the narrator finally returns to the shop and sees who he thinks is Mr. Gessler's elder brother working with leather. The narrator greets him, but Mr. Gessler replies that his elder brother has passed away. He looks closely at the narrator, showing that he has aged and possibly has poor eyesight. The narrator realizes that it isn't the elder brother standing before him. It is Mr. Gessler himself. He is shocked at how old and tired Mr. Gessler has become and expresses sympathy for his loss. Mr. Gessler speaks briefly about his brother, expressing respect by calling him a good man who made high-quality boots. His words show how deeply he valued his brother's skill. Mr. Gessler gestures to his head, possibly indicating that his brother died from stress or exhaustion, perhaps due to the difficulties of their demanding trade. Despite his loss, Mr. Gessler remained focused on his craft and immediately asks the narrator if he wants to order any boots. He holds up a piece of leather, admiring its quality and calling it a beautiful piece. This shows that his dedication to shoemaking remains strong even after all the hardships he's endured. The narrator ordered multiple pairs of boots, which took a long time to arrive, showing Mr. Gessler's dedication and meticulousness. When the boots finally arrived, they were of such high quality that they were practically everlasting. After receiving the boots, the narrator leaves the country, so he does not visit Mr. Gessler's shop for a while. More than a year later, when the narrator returns to London, he immediately goes to visit Mr. Gessler's shop, showing his loyalty and respect for Mr. Gessler's work. Before, Mr. Gessler appeared to be around 60 years old, but now he looks much older, around 75, tired and worn out from his struggles. This drastic change shocks the narrator, and Mr. Gessler does not immediately recognize him. Mr. Gessler asks if narrator needs boots, explaining that it is a slow time for him, meaning he has very few orders. This hints at his struggling business and lack of customers. Out of compassion, the narrator places a large order for many kinds of boots, hoping to support Mr. Gessler during his difficult times. The narrator had nearly given up hope of receiving his order, but one evening the boots finally arrive. He tries them on and finds them to be the best pair Mr. Gessler has ever crafted, demonstrating Mr. Gessler's skill and dedication to his craft. The narrator is so impressed with the boots that he quickly writes a check to pay Mr. Gessler and mails it to himself to make sure he receives the payment as soon as possible. A week later, the narrator decides to stop by the shop to personally thank Mr. Gessler for his outstanding work on the boots. When he reaches the location of Mr. Gessler's shop, he is shocked to see that the shop is no longer there and the familiar sign with Gessler's brother has been removed. Feeling uneasy, the narrator enters the shop where he finds a young Englishman, indicating that the shop has changed ownership. The narrator asks if Mr. Gessler is there, hoping to see him despite the changes. The young man informs him that Mr. Gessler is not there and explains that his company has taken over the shop. The narrator, still surprised and confused, asks specifically about Mr. Gessler, wanting to know what happened to him. The young man replies that Mr. Gessler has passed away, which deeply shocks the narrator. The narrator is stunned, especially because he just received his boots from Mr. Gessler's a week earlier. He finds it hard to believe that Mr. Gessler could have died so recently after making his order. The young man explains that Mr. Gessler essentially starved himself over time. He was so consumed by his work and devotion to his craft that he neglected his own health. The doctor described this gradual neglect as slow starvation. Mr. Gessler was very particular about his work. He refused to let anyone else work on the boots, insisting on doing everything himself, which slowed down his production but maintained the quality of each boot. Mr. Gessler's dedication to quality meant that each order took a long time to complete. Unfortunately, this led to a loss of customers because people wanted quicker service and unwillingly to wait for his meticulously crafted boots. Mr. Gessler would work continuously day after day, focusing solely on his craft. The young man acknowledges that no one in London made boots as good as Mr. Gessler, but this dedication came at a cost. With many new boot makers entering the market and aggressive advertising by large companies, Mr. Gessler could not compete. He did not advertise relying only on his reputation, while others gained customers through marketing. Mr. Gessler insisted on using only the finest leather and preferred to handle every step of the work himself. The young man implies that Mr. Gessler's old-fashioned, uncompromising standards were unsuitable in the modern business world. The narrator expresses shock and sadness upon learning that Mr. Gessler suffered from malnutrition. His decline attributed to his devotion to his craft over his own needs. The young man admits that while starvation might sound dramatic, it reflects the truth of Mr. Gessler's life. He spent all his time and energy on his boots, working tirelessly day and night until he had nothing left. Mr. Gessler sacrificed his basic needs for his shop, spending all money on rent and high-quality materials. He was so devoted that he often went without meals or money. The young man is amazed that Mr. Gessler lived as long as he did, given his harsh living conditions and lack of self-care. Despite everything, Mr. Gessler was remembered as a unique individual who produced unmatched quality. The narrator agrees, summing up Mr. Gessler's legacy. Though he may have faced hardships and ultimate tragedy, his craftsmanship and dedication left a lasting impression. Now, the lesson learned from this chapter. The story quality teaches us important lessons about life and work. First, it shows the value of doing good work with full dedication, commitment, and taking pride towards one's work. The Gessler brothers, throughout the entire story, remained true to themselves and their work, despite suffering heavy losses. However, it also reminds us that we need to take care of ourselves and not ignore our health in the process. While it is good to have strong values, we also need to be open to changes around us, like how other businesses use advertisements. The story shows that respect earned through dedication and honesty is more lasting than money or success. In the end, quality teaches us to love our work, balance hard work with self-care, stay open to change, and always aim for respect through honest efforts. One must work with dedication and passion so that even if they die one day, their name, like the Gessler brothers, will carry on. Did the story inspire you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories from your NCERT syllabus.